Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man has finally arrived in theatres, and the new film functions as both a continuation and a culmination of Tommy Shelby's long, violent and psychologically fraught journey. In essence, The Immortal Man is less about tying up every loose end and more about confronting the myth of Cillian Murphy's character in how he sees himself, how others see him, and whether a man built on violence can ever truly escape it. It's a story about legacy, guilt and the cost of survival, framed against the backdrop of a world on the brink. So in this explained analysis, I'm going to be giving you my breakdown of the new film, discussing the ending, what it means for the planned sequel series, and my overall review. There will be spoilers in this video, so if you haven't watched the film yet, then I would recommend checking it out before watching my analysis. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more on upcoming releases like Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into my breakdown and review for Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man. So Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man isn't just a continuation of what the TV series explored, as it's a story that treats Tommy Shelby as a figure wrestling with the idea of legacy and what survives of a man after everything has been taken from him. The film leans heavily into the psychological and spiritual fallout of Tommy's past choices, framing him as a man who has died 1,000 symbolic deaths yet continues to walk forward as if cursed to endure. The movie's tone is darker and more introspective, and instead of the sprawling ensemble focus, the narrative tightens around Tommy's internal war with his guilt, his trauma, and the ghosts that have followed him since the trenches of France. The film opens 6 years after the end of season 6, and right away it becomes clear that the world has moved on without Tommy. He's vanished into a self-imposed exile, living far from Birmingham, far from the Peaky Blinders, and far from the ghosts that have been eating him alive. But the past has a way of dragging Tommy back. Ada Thorne, who's now an MP, is assassinated during Tommy's return to Smallheath, and Tommy feels her death instantly, despite being far away. Ada had been standing in the way of a fascist conspiracy led by Tim Roth's Beckett, a treasurer of the British Union of Fascists, who is working with Nazi backing to destabilise Britain by flooding the economy with forged banknotes. When Duke Shelby, Tommy's illegitimate son and the new leader of the Blinders, refuses to kill Ada on Beckett's orders, Beckett shoots her himself. So when Tommy arrives back in Birmingham, he comes with a single purpose, and that is to save his son Duke and dismantle Beckett's operation. But the film slowly reveals that Tommy's exile wasn't just grief, as it was partly guilt. Through flashbacks, we learn that Arthur Shelby didn't die in the way as everyone believed him to. We learn that Tommy himself had killed him in a moment of rage, trapped in a car with Arthur's spiralling addiction and chaos, and he snapped and choked his brother to death. And combined with the death of his daughter Ruby, this all shattered him. He fled society, fled the Blinders, and metaphorically fled himself because of it. And it's in this broken state that he met Rebecca Ferguson's Cowlo, the Queen of the Palmer Witches, and Zelda's twin sister, who promises him peace if he returns to save Duke. And as we know, Zelda was also Duke's mother. What Tommy doesn't realise though is that Cowlo's peace is death. She intends for Duke to kill his father, believing that only by removing Tommy can Duke truly step out of his shadow and lead the Peaky Blinders. Once back in Birmingham, Tommy and Duke begin to form a tense alliance to take down Beckett. Tommy gathers a handful of old allies and crafts a plan that feels like classic Shelby strategy. It includes canal boats, explosives, and a promise to see a bit of good within all the bad. Initially, Duke appears to betray the plan by leaking details to Beckett, but we do learn a bit after this that it was a double bluff. And that's because the real attack involves the boats being packed with explosives designed to wipe out a large portion of Beckett's Nazi platoon in one single strike. While this happens, Tommy approaches the warehouse through a sealed narrow tunnel underneath. The confined space he crawls through triggers brutal flashbacks to his time as a tunneler in World War I, the trauma that now shapes him and the trauma he was never able to escape. But he does reach the warehouse, and the attack eventually culminates in a chaotic, explosive shootout with most of Beckett's men killed quite quickly. Tommy detonates the mine that incinerates the containers of forged money, sending millions of counterfeit notes up in flames. Beckett begins to flee, scrambling into a bullet-riddled car and speeds towards the exit. But Tommy steps out into his path with a gun raised, waiting for the perfect moment. Beckett shoots him twice in the stomach before Tommy finally puts a single bullet through Beckett's skull. And this brings us to the final moments of Tommy Shelby. Mortally wounded, Tommy knows what comes next. He embraces Duke and tells him the truth that he is ready to die and that Duke must kill him publicly to cement his place as the new leader of the Peaky Blinders. It is both a passing of the torch moment and a final act of atonement. Duke shoots his father as they hold on to each other, and Tommy Shelby, the man who survived war, empire, fascists, and his own demons, finally dies. The film closes with Cowlow retrieving the manuscript that Tommy had been writing in exile, titled The Immortal Man, and his body is placed on a bed of forged money inside a wheeled Romany funeral carriage, surrounded by photographs of the family he both loved and destroyed. On the moors, the carriage is set ablaze, and Duke, Cowlow, and the surviving Blinders watch on as the flames consume the legend of Tommy Shelby. So in recapping what happened, it's now time to talk about how The Immortal Man both feels like a proper ending, but also a new beginning for Peaky Blinders as a whole. It closes the book on the original chapter, leaving Tommy in a place that feels earned, honest, and thematically resonant. It's not a neat ending, but it's a powerful one as it acknowledges the complexity of a man who has lived too many lives and buried too many truths. In the end, it doesn't try to make Tommy Shelby a hero or a villain, as it simply presents him as a man who has survived everything except himself. So while it closes the book on Tommy Shelby's era, it quietly cracks open the door to a very different future for the franchise. Stephen Knight has been clear that the film is the final chapter of this particular phase, but not the end of the world he built. In fact, the ending of The Immortal Man functions almost like a narrative handoff, with Tommy's story reaching emotional closure, but the world around him being deliberately left open, volatile, and full of unresolved power vacuums. Knight has already set the next major project in motion, with 2 full seasons of a sequel series centered on a new generation of Shelbys, set in 1953, 13 years after the events of the new film. What I think's clever is how the film's ending positions this shift. By concluding Tommy's arc with finality, emotionally, spiritually, and structurally, the story frees the franchise from orbiting him while still letting his legacy loom large. The Immortal Man doesn't just wrap up his journey, as it reshapes the Shelby mythos into something future characters will have to live under or rebel against. And that's exactly what the sequel series seems designed to explore. Knight has previously described it as a story of a new gang of Shelbys navigating a Birmingham rising from the ashes of the Blitz, a city rebuilding itself in a new era of politics, crime, and identity. The industrial grime of the post-World War I world gives way to a Britain on the cusp of modernity, and the younger Shelbys will be inheriting a world shaped by Tommy's choices, but no longer defined by his presence. Based on everything publicly confirmed so far, there is no official announcement that Duke Shelby will appear in the upcoming sequel series set in 1953. But what we do know is that production has already begun under the working title of Peaky 1953, with filming underway in Stoke-on-Trent, where entire streets have been transformed into post-war Birmingham. So this all tells us that the sequel series isn't just a small epilogue, as it's a full-scale continuation with its own identity, aesthetic, and stakes. So the Peaky Blinders name will live on, but in a world where the rules are changing, the power structures are shifting, and the Shelby legacy is both a blessing and a curse for whoever steps up next. So what are my overall thoughts on Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man? Well, I thought it was a fascinating, ambitious, and occasionally uneven return to one of television's most mythologized crime sagas. What the film does best, and what I think fans will immediately latch onto, is its commitment to the operatic tone that defines the original series. From the opening frames, you can feel that familiar Peaky energy in the smoke-choked streets, the industrial hum, and the sense that every character is carrying a lifetime of violence in their eyes. Visually, the film is also stunning, as the cinematography makes Birmingham feel like a haunted cathedral of ambition and regret. It's clear the creative team wanted this to feel like a cinematic evolution of the show rather than a simple continuation, and on that front, they absolutely deliver. Where the film shines most though is in its portrayal of Tommy Shelby. The Immortal Man leans into the idea that Tommy has become more legend than man, and Cillian Murphy plays him with a quieter, more introspective energy than we've ever seen before. He's still sharp, still dangerous, but there's a weariness beneath the surface, a sense that he's finally confronting the cost of being the man that everyone believes he is. The script gives him room to breathe, to reflect, and to unravel in ways that feel earned. It's a performance that anchors the entire film, even when the narrative around him occasionally stumbles. And with that said, the film isn't without its flaws. The pacing, for example, is deliberately slow, and sometimes it's to its benefit, but other times it's to its detriment. It also introduces several new characters and subplots that don't always land, like what we got with Beckett. I think a bit more screen time with his character would have helped to really solidify him as an iconic villain in the Peaky saga. It's not enough to derail the film, but there are moments where I feel like the narrative could have upped the momentum, yet also added to some of its other characters. The Immortal Man clearly wants to elevate Tommy Shelby into a near-mythic figure, and while that ambition is admirable and I love that kind of approach, it does occasionally push the story into territory that feels a bit too self-aware. The Peaky Blinders have always existed in a heightened reality, being stylized, theatrical, and almost operatic, but the film sometimes leans so heavily into the legend of Shelby that it loses some of the grounded emotional core that made the show and its characters so compelling. But despite these small issues, the film's main emotional beats do land with real weight. When the Immortal Man focuses on the relationships, in Tommy's fractured family ties, his lingering guilt, and the ghosts that still haunt him, it becomes something genuinely powerful. There's a sense of history in every interaction, a feeling that Tommy has lived through too much to ever truly escape himself. So ultimately, Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man is a bold, atmospheric, and emotionally resonant continuation of the Shelby legend. It's not a perfect film, and it doesn't always balance its ambition with its execution, but when it does work, it works beautifully. The film feels like both a farewell and a rebirth, an attempt to close one chapter while leaving the door open for another. Fans will find plenty to love in the performances, the visuals, the music, and the sense of scale. And even its flaws feel like the result of a creative team swinging for the fences rather than playing it safe. In the end, it's a worthy addition to the Peaky Blinders saga and the end of Tommy Shelby's story. But that was my review and breakdown of Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man. What did you guys think of the final chapter in Tommy Shelby's story, and are you looking forward to where the Peaky Blinders story goes in the next series? Let me know down below in the comments section. For much more videos and news on the Peaky Blinders movie, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.